Hello world, and welcome back to my Rewind Remix breakdown. This is going to be the final video. I made two of them already on the basses and the vocals of the track. A lot of cool techniques in there, so you might want to check them out. And on this video I want to talk about all the rest, which is the drums and the atmospheres, all the little sprinkles and details in the background that you might not have noticed until now. So let's just get started with the two things you start hearing in the track at the very beginning. Which is for once this bottle of liquor I snapped my finger against. And then I pitched it down around 2.5 octaves. And yeah, there's a lot of effects on it, but it's all really subtle. Like a little bit of reverb, a little bit of EQ, a little bit of compression, and a comp filter emphasizing the note it's playing already, and some more EQ. And this washout knob is used later on the track, and I'll get to it on other instruments where I used it too. So all those effects are just to make it easy to listen to, and yeah, I just spread it out all over the track, so it's necessary that it doesn't get annoying. For example, in the breakdown section of the track. In the track it sounds like this. And you can already tell it's coming back, and it tells your subconscious, oh, we're getting back to the verse in a bit. Like this is the very end. And then we're back. And the other thing you can hear in the intro is the original Rewind atmosphere. With quite a bunch of effects. We got some frequencies shifting here, but only on the high end, because I think it sounded cooler together with the lo-fi effect. Oh yeah, it made the bum in the high end sound more in tune to me, like an octave. And then I put some stereo enhancer on it to make it really white. And then we got this weird EQ that gets rid of most of the lows and emphasizes some notes I liked. And this EQ emphasizes the lows when they come back in, which is happening at the end of the second verse to build some tension. So the highs drop quite a noticeable amount when the verse starts of this rewind atmosphere. So there's room for a lot of other stuff. But before we get to that, I'll talk about another atmosphere, which sounds like this. And this was actually something I put in at the very start of the track, because I wanted, you know, things being reversed and stuff. And this was a random splice restaurant crowd atmosphere. Yeah, it just turned out to sound quite creepy when being reversed and with a bit of reverb. Especially those kids in here having fun. Or whatever it is. And there's a lot of these little sprinkles in between. Like, yeah, it just sounded really cool. Alright, next up we're starting with the verse. And you can hear this little bass guitar, which is a flex instrument. Sounds like this. And I just emphasized those little high mid noisy bits around here with a delay. And this is just making the lows mono for mono compatibility. Also you can see a peak controller on here that is ducking this atmosphere we just talked about at each hit. So we get this sidechain kind of feel already. And next up, we got some small drums. Yeah, not much to talk about here, just a tambourine and a weird hi-hat. And this guitar, which is a flex guitar as well. And originally I had some vibrato on it, So I'm still kind of into that vibe. Here's some EQ as well. But it sounded too much out of tune. I already said this on the vocal breakdown, but people thought something was out of tune, and so I just got rid of the vibrato to make the chords sound as clear as they could so no one would get it wrong. Then to create a little bit of a sweep, I automated this filter knob on the ambience. And in the context of the track, it sounds like this. And then the drums come in, which are the drop drums with some layers taken away. So I'll be talking about them when the time comes. Next up, there's another flex instrument, which is called Blue Cordian. And it sounds like this. Kind of creepy. And I emphasized the lows here, which didn't make that much sense because the low space was taken away by the bass guitar already. But yeah, that's just that little background layer, little creepy future. And finally, there's just this little pad here at the end of the verse. To build a little bit of tension. And also you might have noticed this noise. And I'm gonna talk about that one later. So then you're starting to hear this ring modulation effect. The wet amount is really small here, but you can hear it really well, I think. And it does this da, 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 little rising effect to the bass guitar. And also we got some washing out happening. So this washout knob is connected to the input amount, to a delay, and to the wet amount of the reverb. Also the dry amount is getting reduced a bit, and we got this filter happening. So we're getting rid of the lows, we're increasing the amount altogether, and getting rid of some mids here. I don't know if that truly makes sense, but it sounded good to me, so I guess it kind of does. Also getting rid of the highs. And this washout knob is on quite a bunch of instruments, so you can hear it at the very end. We have some delay happening and a lot of lows missing. To then come in with the bass hits that aren't on this breakdown track, because it's just all the rest, but in the track it sounds like this. Well, the drums here are quite simple, just some crash cymbals, some different ones. I don't like to use the same crash cymbal over and over again. And those first three sounded kind of in tune. Like da, da, da. And then I wanted a da. So I took the second one and pitched it down. The kick is just the drop kick with a filter on it. That's what it sounds like. Notice the amount of manual volume control I did on the crashes. Like we have some sidechaining happening here, but it's not cut out entirely. And then to create this sweep at the end, rising towards the next hit, yeah, you can see the curve. Then next up, you get those little hits, which are an impact from FL Studio's Impulse Pack. They are meant to be used in Fruity Convolver. When you want things to sound like they are in a certain kind of room, then you use convolution reverb, and you need those impulses there, which you can select here. But you can also just put those impulses in your track, and I really like some of them as some small background layers. Like, this sounds really nice. And it's also really stereo, at least if you increase it that much. And what's on here? Just some delay. Also, you can hear this little snare. They are really shortened and pitched up. And I put the effector reverb on it again. You kind of know this by now, but I really like to use it, so I'm separating it from the original signal with the fruity stereo shaper here, so I can EQ it afterwards, and I'm increasing the highs a lot on the reverb, so without it and with it. And then automating the wet amount. So then we got this pad in the chorus, which is pitched to the chords. Finally, we're heading to the drop with this drop hat. And the original sample of this drop hat sounds something like this. You notice how it's much faster than I played it in the track, but I wanted all those different hits of the same hat. So I put it in SliceX, and apparently that works really easy. I just used this volume envelope here to not have it cut off so abruptly, and the effects you can hear are just some EQ and the drop drum effects, which I'll talk about later as well. So that's how that sounds, but apart from the drums we got some other stuff happening here as well, which is this 1-bar riser I created myself in Serum. Sounds like this, and what it does is opening a filter up towards the low end, and also I'm automating the pitch here, and at the very end we're getting below this middle point, and then it sounds kind of like a tape stop. And I made the low end mono, added some EQ, and apparently instead of using the stereo enhancer here, I used poly versus wider with a 200% amount to make it really wide. So another thing you might or might not have noticed is the original rewind bass. It is there. I did use the original. I know it's kind of subtle, but yeah. So you can hear some panning happening on the rewind bass if you're in headphones, and it's being increased towards the end, but also it's filtered out towards the end, so you hear less and less of it. Here you can see the filter, nothing too crazy happening. And I think there's some delay happening, yeah. Also, something that I deem kind of uncommon in bass music these days is having volume automation on drums. Mostly the drums are filtered or not and hit really loud or really low, but this volume increase is kind of old school. And something about this, there's something about Riddim that has this original approach to music. Like, I always think of bass music as a subtractive concept, because when one element is there, like you have a certain amount of space and it gets chopped up for all the elements you want. Like when the drums happen, you do sidechain, so you can only hear the drums, which is this one element filling up all the space. And then when the sidechain drops, you might have a bass and some cymbals, and then you get 75% bass and 25% cymbals or something. So that's not happening quite in Riddim, I'd say. Like, you still get this approach of adding up instruments, and when there are more instruments, you don't share the space, but it just sounds louder, like more dynamic. And yeah, that's the vibe I was aiming for here with this. It's nothing too crazy, I know. Okay, I stopped talking about it. And next up, we're heading to the drop. So those are some quite weird drums, but before starting from the top, I just walk you through all the drum bass effects, which is some reverb. And again, this is quite unordinary for electronic bass music. You want drums to be on point, but in Riddim it's more like a room and gives it some acoustic feel actually. There's some really mild compression, mainly to lower the volume of the clap a bit. And then we got some clipping. I think it barely does anything. Apart from the part where I unintentionally left 2 kick drums on top of each other. I don't remember where it was. I think here. I just noticed that like 2 days ago there's a lost kick drum here. But yeah, it's definitely a design choice and not a mistake. Whatever. So you got this clipper here, which is just a Fruity Loops soft clipper, and I'm increasing the bass beforehand a bit so we get more of this poopy feel. This is a filter, the filter I'm using on the intro. So they sound like this. And then a tape stab sound effect, which I'm using in the breakdown section. And finally a filter. Oh, that's just lowering the bass amount right when this tape stop happens. So we don't get too much low end at the end of the tape stop. Now, let's just start taking a look at the kick drum. I'm gonna turn all the drum bus effects off. This is how it originally sounds, but I pitched it down and then EQ'd it a lot actually. This is something I'm starting to do almost on every kick drum I use, like lowering the low mids. And what it does is you get a cleaner result when the track is clipping, because the more low, mid and bass information goes through it, the more you get a fuzzy, distorted sound. And the more sub goes through it, the more it sounds kind of fluttery. If you take a sub and distort it together with some noise, then the higher the sub plays, the faster the flutters for the noise happen. And I think it sounds way cleaner if the notes are lower, and the same happens with the kick and everything else being distorted together. So yeah, taking out the low mids, that's that. Then we got this weird clap thing happening. It's quite a lot of layers. We got a snap, and we got a snare, a bad snare, really bad, but it has this pre-shift thing. So I put the pre-shift thing there again. It also increases the transient quite a bit. Then we got this whip clap, but it's stretched out quite a bit. Originally it sounds like this, but stretched out. Sounds like this. And then I'm adding all pass phase, the disperser alternative, the free one, 5 times in a row with all the intensity turned up. So we got 250 iterations, and I automated the frequency knob in this weird way. Like if you switch off the LFO, add a curve in there, and then turn off the LFO, somehow the curve is still active, and then we got the LFO happening. So it's going up and down, but increasing altogether. And that makes it sound like this. I wanted to do this because I found the original rewind drums to sound really original. Wow, the original drums sound original. I thought I couldn't get as interesting as them, so I used them for quite a lot of time while producing. But then I thought that's kind of boring. You want to do it yourself. And I ended up with this really weird whip layer. And finally there's a company snare. A high-passed one to increase the punch of it, I guess. And together it sounds like that. So this is all about the drop drums, I'd say. After that we got some glass breaking effects. There's some little cymbal sweeps in between. So this is how my drop drums would sound like for a long time. But then I was missing highs, so I added this layer. And something you might have noticed first is the all-pass phase on it, which turns those transient hits into little laser zaps. All of this is probably not too necessary, just some compression and some compression. And this is all the drums together. Now on the second drop there's a tiny addition, which is those toms. And there's again the same thing, just some frequency shifting happening and a big lot of all pass phase. without it, with it. Okay, finally I want you to see how far the kick drum is off grid. That's kind of adding up to the wonkiness of the second drop. Like we got even more wonkiness because of the all-pass phase on the bass, and then the drums needed to be off grid a little bit more as well. And that's what's happening here. So apart from the basses and drums, there's one other thing you can hear on the drop, which is this atmosphere. Of course it's being sidechained, and originally it's this transition. And what I found cool about it is the way it's playing a minor second there. So pretty generic, just putting some reverb on it, EQing it, and lowering its volume when other interesting stuff happens in the drop, especially at this section here when the new bass is hit. I'm getting rid of it for a moment there, and then it's coming back in. Together with this delay arp thing, actually. Sounds like this. Only cutting out the lows there. And we got those two old waveform presets happening and a lot of high passing. It's really short, as you can see, and I'm automating the wavetable position to make it sound a little more dynamic. And then most noticeably is this delay with quite a low amount. And that's that. So a little teaser to the bottle of liquor I'm bringing back in the breakdown section. Like, remember this? This is him now. Feel old yet? Yeah, it's just a little more aggressive version, pitched up and stretched. So then we're in the breakdown section, and all that's new here is this pitched version of this atmosphere. There's a filter being automated. There's some distortion on it. So I added this atmosphere actually just for one reason, so I could have something there to be ducked when the sub punch bass plays, if you remember. But then it wasn't in key, so I made it go down really slowly in pitch, and sidechained it as well when the kick drum hit. Maybe wondering why I'm not sidechaining it with everything else. And that's because everything else is just being sidechained in a way. So normally I just separate the sidechain bus into 3 bands and automate their volume with a fruity balance. And then you can see those curves here. I'm just shaping them right around the kick drum, so you barely notice it. Especially in a Riddim track, I asked Infect himself, and he mostly just sidechains the lows, so we don't get any interference there with the basses. And yeah, I'm just adding a little bit of an effect to the mids and the highs, but in this case I wanted more of it happening, so that's why I just put a separate fruity balance on there. And that's that. So something you might have noticed already is these little noise fills in here. I used Citrus for that because Citrus has this preset called noise effects. You get this. As you can hear, it has a filter on it that's being automated and some effects. So get rid of the effects here. And on the filter too, you see this curve with an LFO on it, and just deactivate the LFO, and you can easily control the noise here, like its width and its pitch. And at the very end you get this noise, which is kind of helpful sometimes as well. And I made it my own preset, and I'm always using this noise just for some little fills in the background. And this is volume automation. All in all, I try to avoid using noise because it's really atonal, so it's just there to fill the really little gaps in your track. Then next up, we're back on the verse. And now the key change happens on the vocals. And then I needed this big impact. And making an impact like this is not as easy as I thought. So there's quite a bunch of layers. At first you can hear 2 virtual ride impacts. One I'm just using for the long low end, and one I'm using for this clean reverb sound. That's just as is, and especially on the transient I'm using it, so it kind of sounds sidechain but also impactful at the very start. Something that's one of the advantages of using sidechain as balance volume automation clips on the playlist is you can just mute the mids and the highs at some point, and especially on this impact I just needed that to happen. So then we got this bell indicating the key change. We got this creepy gong, and I put those 2 starting points here to increase the transient somehow because there was barely any. And with it, yeah, kind of not doing much. Well, we got some reverb on it, some effector reverb, and most noticeably there's this random sample made by a friend of mine who, I don't know what he did. He recorded all kinds of stuff at his home to make a track out of it for college, and he sent me the pack, and some of it is just weird household stuff. But EQing this a lot and reverbing it made it sound really good to fill the space. Also you can hear the rewind bass again. Also pitched down, and there's a riser from Eliminate. Then we got this pad again. And we definitely needed one more riser there. That one's from a different sound design session. And I pitched down the original rewind atmosphere quite a lot. This one sounds super creepy, but I didn't mix it quite well, so you can barely hear it. But at the end, it increases in pitch and gets filtered a bit. So in context of the track. I can still kind of hear it. And finally, we got some strings that I forgot because they're all down here. And they're pretty much key to coming back to the main key of the song. There's some ring modulation going on there, just the way I did it on the bass guitar. Just some tiny wet amount. Those strings are a flex patch as well, and it has a phaser knob, and that is really handy and sounds really cool to me, really modern. And they're playing in the verse as well. There's a small background layer. But it does the job there. And also in the second breakdown section, I'm bringing them back. I don't know why, I just felt like it. Yeah, this is just a really easy way to increase the transient without any plugin. Boom. Now for this sweep before the second build up, I used this sample, which is just some noise, but then with a lot of distortion on it and getting rid of the lows towards the end. It sounds like this. Finally, there's a little filler effect here again. On its own, it sounds like this. There's a huge effect that's free from Valhalla, called Valhalla Supermassive, and you should definitely try it out. I just played around with it to get some cool effects from the bass that I could use in the build-up, and that's what I ended up with. Of course, there's some EQing, some filtering happening, and I'm automating it quite a lot. Okay, sound I'm most proud of. I just love it. Weeee. It's a saw wave. It's going up in pitch at the start. It's being filtered a bit, and it's being affected a bit. But all that's just really subtle. Mostly it's a high-pitched saw wave with vibrato on it, and it's panned to the left and right. Look at how the weeee sounds with some lo-fi on it. Like, someone said this once, and I don't remember who it was. Every instrument wants its own attention. Like, you can't have the same layer go all the same throughout the whole track. You always want some little volume automations to leave space, to have some little interesting moments. And then this little lo-fi part. It doesn't matter if you can entirely hear it on the track, but it's just there to make stuff interesting for the attentive listener. We got this laughter here. We got this mini riser. Building little details, little risers like this is really easy. You just need to have something high pitched. Like I took a triangle wave and got rid of the first harmonic. Then it's just going up in pitch. And there's some little volume automation going on and a little bit of dimension expander and frequency shifting. Like all those little details just want their attention as anything else in the track. And together with the track it sounds like this. Little impact reverse. And just using the lows of it. And in the context of the track. Then final little effects in the second drop. Listen to this. There's really a lot happening in the sub there with the all-pass phase on it. And I tried to increase this tension with a cymbal transition that I volume automated, and I automated its pitch as well. And as you can hear towards the end, there's some delay on it as well. And together with everything else, it sounds like this. So I'm afraid to tell you, this is everything I can talk about on the track right now. If I forgot something, again, feel free to hit me up in the comments or talk to me about anything else in my DMs or on my Discord server. You're very much welcome to hop on if you haven't yet. Otherwise, see you anywhere else on my next release. So have a nice day. Bye bye.